Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Rescue Michigan live stream. It's Adam D'Angeli and Shane Trejo. Hope you guys are all having a wonderful summer weekend. And we've got a lot of news to cover, so I guess we're gonna get right into it. Now, I think there is like some latency in the chat. I can't actually participate in the chat for some ridiculous glitch, but I should be able to see your messages. So if you are able to see this live stream, feel free to at least say hello in the chat. Oh, there's someone saying hi. Perfect. So we know that we are actually connected and things seem to be kind of working pretty well. So yeah, we've got a lot to get into. But hey, Shane, how's it going, buddy? I've heard we've got some big news this weekend. Some things happening in the Republican Party State Committee, of which you are more privy to the details than I am. But yeah, why don't you let us know what's been going on?
Well, it's not really good news, but it's news nevertheless. Yesterday, in the issues subcommittee of the Michigan State Republican Party, we had a vote. It was about two interesting resolutions in my eyes. Were the ones to censure Upton and Meyer, which I put forward, and there was another one similar to the one that you drafted, Adam, that called for the resignation of McBroom, Tice, and Bison for authoring the report that called for Attorney General Dana Nessel to investigate Republicans. So, these were two instances where there were Republican lawmakers who were attacking Republicans, who were going into concert with Democrats to not just undermine Republicans, but to enable Democrats to crack down on Republicans. The fraud report will be used as an anchor for the media and Democrats to put around the ankles of Republican lawmakers all next year, making it more difficult for them to get reelected, driving a wedge between them and their constituents, giving them bad PR. So all this stuff is going to be used to hurt the Republican Party. But what was told to us by the Issues Committee chairman, who is Norm Schinkel, he's the guy who refused to decertify the election totals. When he was on the board of canvassers, he just abstained instead of voting not to certify the election, so didn't have the courage to not certify the election when it mattered, the dubious election results, that is. So he, pretty much ripped off the mask, showed his true colors, defended McBroom, said that, as long as you don't, this is what he actually said. And it's mind-blowing, but this is what he said. He said, well, as long as they didn't commit any crimes, they don't have to worry about what Dana Nessel's going to do to them. As if we've just been living, with our heads in the sand for the past how many years, seeing Nessel's gone after tons of people, the flimsiest of recourses, junk charges and all that kind of stuff. But as we saw with the federal deep state going after President Trump constantly on fake Russia charges, totally made up, but completely innocent people had charges thrown at them, had their lives ruined, were imprisoned, cost them millions and millions of dollars, cost them their prestige. Most notably, General Michael Flynn. He did nothing wrong, but he had a multi-year ordeal that was only eventually solved by a Trump pardon. So the fact that he would say that he made many offensive comments while he was standing up for the rhinos, but that was the most offensive, the idea that we should have these overarching, ridiculous witch hunt investigations, that we shouldn't be concerned about them or Republicans enabling them, because if you didn't do anything wrong, well, then they won't find anything. Well, we know that that's not the case. This is a Soviet-style regime that's being put in place. And, we see so many Republicans that are willing to look the other way or willing to, protect that because, I would imagine that, behind the scenes, they're getting payola from some of the same people. So it's pretty disgusting. But at the same time, by us pushing out there, pushing the issues, fighting the good fight, even if it's in vain, we force these people to expose themselves. And that's, going to be the impetus for change and getting rid of these people and replacing them leaders who will put America first consistently.
Yeah, I don't know if I would say that what has transpired was in vain, although it was defeated. And by the way, next time you have the opportunity to reply, I want to get up real quickly and turn off a source of background noise that is irritating me in my microphone right now because I'm hearing it in my headset. There's an air conditioner running that I should have turned off before we started here. But anyway. But getting back to this, yeah, we have the Detroit News story that came out yesterday about this, I think just before it actually happened. And they've got some choice quotes from Norm Schinkel here. I think we want to look at the backstory of this a little bit, although we've talked about this on previous podcasts. And by the way, I originally wrote a sample resolution about this. I never, ever actually called for anybody to put this resolution into play in the state party or anywhere else, but some people picked it up and ran with it, and good for them for doing so. But this wasn't like a huge project of ours. It wasn't like we were working behind the scenes and trying to whip votes for people to do this or anything. In fact, after we had put out that original article, I had written up a proposed petition and thinking, let's encourage people to contact their lawmakers and demand McBroom's resignation and everything else. And then I thought, I don't know if this is what we want to make a huge fight out of. I think we should point out how extraordinarily extreme was the misconduct contained in that report. But at the same time, I was also thinking, well, yeah, but how much of a fight do we want to make out of this? But people are running with it, and that's good. And the resolution, I guess it didn't pass. It was, I think you had said 8-6, although then in the news they were saying 9-5. Are you certain it was 8-6?
It might have been different for both the resolutions. So I know one of them was 8-6.
Okay. And well, there's some story I think they were saying they were both 9-5. I don't know. Either way, it's extraordinary. And let's look at this article here. This is from the Detroit News. This was posted looks like 2 days ago. A committee inside the Michigan Republican Party, that would be the Issues Committee, as you referenced, plans to consider a proposal that calls for the resignation of GOP Senator Ed McBroom, who led a probe finding no evidence of widespread fraud in the 2020 election. And right from the get-go, let's point out they're already framing the issue in a false light here. Because the resignation resolution was not about the report finding no evidence of widespread fraud. That would be bad, considering that the report even mentioned that every single absentee ballot was mishandled, according to the Court of Claims, saying that they didn't follow the proper procedure for signature verification. But that's not what our problem was. The problem was that McBroom called upon the Attorney General to investigate DePerno. Implicitly, he said, investigate those who are profiteering from false claims. But the report itself never alleged any facts to show that DePerno or anybody else was improperly profiteering from claims about the election, whether true or false, whether they believed they were true or false. They never suggested any evidence, because there is no evidence, that DePerno having a legal defense fund for future litigation was inherently, intrinsically, or for any other reason motivated by personal profit. And that was the issue. But anyway,
and let me interject another thing.
Okay, I'm gonna turn off this noisemaker. I'll be right back. You go ahead and explain to the audience what's going on here.
Okay, excellent. So another thing that Norm Schinkel said, that if Norm Schinkel inferred that if anyone is telling a lie here, then that is criminal. That if the government determines that someone like Matt DePerno is a liar, then he is a criminal actor and that he is guilty of some sort of crime. But that's not the case. I mean, you can say whatever you feel to be the truth under the First Amendment, and you can, for the purposes of political speech, fundraise for your causes. So this idea that any one individual says their opinion or their stance, and then the government says that it's untrue, that you're guilty of some crime, that is insane. That's Orwellian. It's against the First Amendment. It's unconstitutional, and that's apparently the line of thinking from Norm Schinkel, the Issues Committee chairman and 8th District Republican Party committee chairman as well.
Yeah, we'll see more of Schinkel's statements, and they're quite interesting. So let's read on into the story. The proposed resolution describes the Senate Oversight Committee's 8-month investigation into the 2020 election as the product of gross official misconduct. And again, we didn't describe and neither did the resolution, which is actually in this story. They actually do link it here. They don't say the entire report is the product of gross official misconduct. It's this particular statement. They reference, and here it is at the top of the article, there's a page break, but you see above the fold, it says the report referenced Attorney Matt DePerno by name no less than 8 times in its effort to refute allegations. Clearly in reference to DePerno, strongly recommends citizens use a critical eye and ear toward those who have pushed demonstrably false sources for their own personal gain. And the report alleges no facts to support its assertion that DePerno or anybody else pushed any theory for their own personal gain. Now, we've been critical about some of DePerno's filings, but that doesn't mean that they were done for personal gain. I don't have any doubt in my mind DePerno sincerely believes everything that was filed, and that's a basic. Number one, it's the basic right to counsel, to have an effective advocate, for a zealous advocate for your beliefs. And as it says in the resolution here, it would be grossly inappropriate under any circumstances for a report prepared by a committee to single out a constituent resident of Michigan for derision, but then went on to call for the Attorney General to investigate him, and of course that's what actually happened. So then they cite the fact that Nessel herself is a highly motivated partisan political actor, and pointing out that they essentially sicked her on DePerno on the basis of a wholly unsupported accusation. And then, and this is the biggest thing, which you notice they don't talk about in this news article anywhere, the fact that Ed McBroom is not a total stranger to Matt DePerno. DePerno was the attorney of counsel suing Matt DePerno in a case. I wonder why the Detroit News wouldn't report that. Maybe it's because the Detroit News was also sued by Matt DePerno by that same party.
Unbelievable, huh?
Yeah, now.
Unreal.
Yeah. Now, as it happened, Detroit News ought to be happy to even talk about that relationship, because they actually did win that case. They won a judgment against DePerno's client, which is what it is. But they don't disclose anywhere in this story. By the way, we're not entirely neutral on this matter ourselves. DePerno did sue us over our reporting on this very same issue. But there you go. Here's another story. This is from Click on Detroit, which is, I think, NBC. And this has some choice statements from Norm Schinkel talking about his opposition to these resolutions. And so the one was the one calling for McBroom's resignation. The other one was a censure on Fred Upton and Peter Meyer, who, number one, supported the sham impeachment of Donald Trump, the second sham impeachment, not the second Trump, second sham impeachment, and then more recently calling for supporting the creation of the so-called January 6th Commission, which is absolutely clearly from the get-go an attempt to blame everything on Trump and his supporters, as evidenced by the fact that Nancy Pelosi herself refused to allow Jim Jordan and is it Jim Banks, the other one, the other representative in the committee, and in fact appointing Adam Kinzinger. And who was the other one? Do you remember who the other one was that they appointed to be the Republicans on the committee? We know Kinzinger is an anti-Trump lunatic, but there's another one too.
Liz Cheney.
Oh, that's right. Liz Cheney. Yes, Liz Cheney. So this is surely going to be an impartial commission. There's not going to be any evidence into figuring out why it was the Capitol Police were so painfully understaffed that fateful day, why the House and Senate sergeants at arms refused to honor their requests for backup, knowing there was going to be a huge crowd of people there that day. no investigation into whatever role the FBI might have played in that event. We're going to look at some of those questions later on, I think, in this show. But anyway, here's the story. This is from WDIV or Click on Detroit or whatever it is. And here's Norm Schinkel. Big meeting tomorrow, Saturday. I've never had negative resolutions in front of me before. This was the first time. We had one in April. Okay, well, that's a contradiction right there. But there you go. Now we have two of them in front of us, Schinkel said on Friday. The first resolution is aimed at Reps Peter Meyer and Fred Upton. Both men crossed party lines and defied congressional party leadership to join 35 other Republicans. They voted to create a commission to investigate the January 6th fake news, calls it an insurrection at the Capitol. Which, if we're going to call that insurrection, why not call every Black Lives Matter riot an insurrection? I mean,
yeah, if January 6th was an insurrection, then Black Lives Matter did over 600 insurrections during the summer of George Floyd in 2020 alone.
Yeah, I think part of the reason people are unhappy about all this stuff is the fact that nobody was ever charged for the actual disruption of the Brett Kavanaugh confirmations, that which did actually postpone them by days, as opposed to the Capitol demonstrations that didn't postpone anything. But more fundamentally, of course, also was the sham impeachment of Trump, and what a constitutional crisis that has created. The fact that they've allowed what is on its face and also in terms of law, if you really go into it, clearly protected First Amendment speech that Trump called for a peaceful march toward the Capitol to be considered an insurrection, damages the First Amendment rights of every American citizen. You know, it's not just about Trump any more than this resolution calling for McBroom's resignation was not just about Matt DePerno. It's about the weaponization of the government against political speech. It's not just about these characters. It's about our fundamental rights and what damage that does. But we'll get back to McBroom in a second. Actually, I guess we'll get back to him right now. Because here we go. The other resolution calls for the resignation of McBroom, who was the author of a report on unfounded claims, according to the media. And again, it's so transparently biased and slanted and unfair to just say unfounded as a self-evident absolute. They just throw that out in there. It was still otherwise fraudulent. Again, it was determined by the Court of Claims. The manner that most ballots in Michigan were processed was unlawful. Right there. That alone is enormous. But on top of that, you know, I actually, I was at an event today. I got to hear Christina Caramo speak. She's a candidate for Secretary of State. She was an eyewitness to the election frauds that was happening at TCF Center. And she was telling us, as she testified before the Senate, she saw adjudicators look at a ballot where someone voted straight ticket Republican and straight ticket Democrat both. And the officials deliberately said, let's give that one to the Democrat, which is completely transparently on its face, totally illegal. And they just ignore it, they dismiss it. It's unbelievable propaganda, the level that they go to. But it goes on. The senator found there was no evidence to support those claims and asked Attorney General Dana Nessel to investigate those who have been profiting from election lies. And again, I mean, notice first of all the construction of this, profiting from election lies. That's not even a cognizable legal standard. You know, if you represent a client, let's say you're defending a client accused of murder, and let's say he actually is a murderer, but he has a right to counsel, and you have the right to defend him, and that involves raising money for his legal defense, you're profiting from his lies. But that's the right to counsel, and that's what's under threat here. Is that when the Attorney General is going after people for defending clients, even if they're wrong, and again, no evidence of actual profiteering, no evidence of intentional misrepresentation, nothing. They offer nothing.
And another thing I'd like to bring up is that Matt DePerno is running for Attorney General in the Michigan Republican Party right now.
Yeah.
So this report was, in essence, an attack against a Republican, a politically motivated attack against a Republican contender who the establishment absolutely hates, and they want him out of their hair. So this was an attack on Republicans, and Norm Schinkel, the ultimate hypocrite, has no problem with that attack on the Republicans because it's a grassroots favorite getting shit on and not a part of a guy who's in his crony club.
Yeah, look at this. Look at this quote from Schinkel right here. They're embarrassing. I'm embarrassed for the people that put them forward because they're hateful. Schinkel said about the resolutions brought from newer members of the party, which he described as teenagers. We have some new kid on the block who has to be taught how to play the game fairly with the rest of us. We have some people who, if you didn't know better, you think they were being paid for by the Democrats. They're going after their own. Oh, is that like what Ed McBroom did? Publishing a report calling for the Democrat Attorney General to investigate Matt DePerno, who, by the way, you don't have to agree with Matt DePerno. I don't agree with some of the things that Matt DePerno has said. But who's going after their own here? Who went after their own? Are the Republicans unaware that the huge majority of Republican voters do believe correctly there was some level of wrongdoing in the election? How is that not? And this was done, remember, that report came out just days after about 10,000 Republican activists submitted petitions calling for a forensic audit of the election. Who's going after their own here?
Yeah, it's just, this is why I wrote a big article on rightmichigan.com days before this issues committee battle was going to happen. Kind of understood how it was going to end, unfortunately, considering Norm runs the commission and has, a firm majority in his back pocket. But I wrote it out there just to try to make a plea to people is that we're never going to have unity unless there's accountability toward these bad actors who just have no respect for the grassroots, do not care about their constituents in the least, and will openly collude with Democrats to run roughshod on their own constituents. So this is not a big thing to pass a resolution through the state party. It just makes it clear. It just shows to our constituents that, hey, these are rogue lawmakers in Lansing who are not representing the will of the party. We need you. We need our constituents. We need the grassroots. We need you guys to win. And these people with their double dealing behavior, with their colluding with Dana Nessel, with their trying to bring the hammer down on Republican constituents and Republican grassroots heroes, that is not acceptable, and we rebuke that. But they've made it clear now that they don't rebuke it, and it's going to pour fuel on the fire of the people who say that the state party is in cahoots with all these different lawmakers in Lansing. When the state party refuses to do what's right and rebuke these awful people, how can you argue that they're not all in cahoots? How can you argue that all these people aren't, laughing in our faces behind our backs? You can't make that argument. And, this is, it's obviously, Schinkel just wants the status quo. He wants things to go back the way that they've always been in his, 60, 70 years in the party, however long he's been here doing things. It's no surprise that all of our freedoms were pissed away on his watch. But nevertheless, he wants things to go back to the status quo, to what he is, suited for, what he's been doing all these years. All the new people in the party who are the firm majority don't want to do it that way. And Norm can be his own worst enemy, making statements about like this in the press because, this is going to inflame the grassroots even more. And I would say that, no one's doing more to drive a wedge through the Republican Party right now than Norm Schinkel.
Yeah, I mean, hey, if Norm Schinkel's problem is the dirty laundry that I guess we're creating by having this resolution, although really it was created by McBroom in the first place, it would have been fine if the report had simply made factual judgments on various allegations from DePerno and others. But no, they couldn't do that. They couldn't help themselves. They had to attack him and call for the Attorney General to investigate him. And who's airing dirty laundry there? By the way, I mentioned I took no steps beyond just putting out into the ether this proposed resolution language, but I didn't tell the news media there was going to be a vote about this. Did you?
Oh,
How did the
who could
Detroit
have
News?
been?
How did the Detroit News and WDIV get the material for the story? Do you suppose? Who was airing dirty laundry there?
Well, I mean, who's quoted in the article?
Norm
Extensively.
Schinkel is.
Hmm.
Did Norm Schinkel call the Detroit News and call WDIV to air this dirty laundry? Because why else is the mass media covering it? I mean, and by the way, you know, you have to love the irony of all this stuff. I mean, first of all, because he couldn't help himself, because McBroom was so consumed by his desire to burn DePerno that he put all that into the report. He actually probably had the exact opposite of the effect the report was intended to have. The hope was that the report would get the grassroots to stop talking about election integrity because we've done all this research and here's this and here's this and here's this. So you should believe us, right? And instead, because he chose to go after DePerno personally, he ended up destroying his credibility as an impartial author of the report and led the grassroots into this position of tremendous backlash. And now, because Norm Schinkel chose to jabber to the media about all this stuff and pick these fights, they've made the problem even worse. So who's going to turn around now and call for the party to be unified when they can't stop kicking? And they can't stop screaming. They can't stop kicking the grassroots. And then they're going to come back and whine about, why aren't we unified? Why aren't we unified? I don't understand. We put out this great reports on the grassroots. They're a bunch of idiots and also calling for the Attorney General to investigate their people. And now we're calling them these new kids on the block. And when we're attacking them publicly in the mass media, why on earth are the grassroots so mad at us? I mean, you have to appreciate the stupidity of the whole thing. That what they're doing is so positively counterproductive, and all the while whining that we're the problem. I mean, look.
Yeah, I mean, it shows that they're beyond hope. You know, these people are just going to have to be replaced, and you know, we're going to have to turn the page on these people who, I mean, they've conserved nothing. They've, you know, failed so frequently over the years to do anything except what? Line up for an easy paycheck and do the bidding of whoever's in power. I mean, we've seen the fruits of what that has done for the country right now with the current state that we're in. So there's going to need to be replacements for a lot of leaders at every level of the Republican Party very shortly if you want to you know, actually push back against the takeover that's happening. These people standing in our way is not acceptable.
Yeah, I mean, look at this paragraph here. The party's executive director, Jason Rowe, resigned after telling The Atlantic. Why is Jason Rowe talking to The Atlantic? Saying he'd been under constant assault from the grassroots of the Michigan Republican Party for saying the election wasn't stolen. He said a lot more than that, though. He was gratuitously disparaging of the grassroots, and you know, we stayed out of that fight. You know, that wasn't one I wanted to get into. Didn't think it was important. But who's talking to the mass media and airing this dirty laundry? And here we go. So the party's new communications director. So the previous one left to work for James Craig, and good for him. We wish him the best. So some new guy came in. I don't even know who it is. Resigned after less than a week on the job, citing concerns the party would be unable to break with the rhetoric of Trump. Who was this guy that they hired who quit less than a week later attacking the party? Like, if you're a communications director for the state party or for any political party or for any campaign, you have a certain professional duty. You know, first of all, as an employee, and second of all, even after your relationship is over, if you want to be considered a professional, you don't start bad-mouthing your former employers. And this guy, whoever he was, worked for a week, resigned less than a week on the job. I guess he didn't want to put food on his table for his family. Didn't mind quitting the job less than a week later, and threw the party under the bus. I'm concerned the party won't be able to break with the rhetoric of Trump. When was that even a problem? Does he think Ron Weiser is going to use Donald Trump's rhetoric? If so, why did he take the job in the first place? I mean, it's just amazing to me. The establishment thinks they can just badmouth and trash everybody all the time as much as they want, and then they get mad at us when we criticize anything that they do ever. You know, we talked about this in the last video. Loyalty is a two-way street. Why should the grassroots be loyal when this is the actions the party takes? So
one thing I'd like to mention is that I think the grassroots has finally kind of realized, and I think Trump has kind of helped in this regard, because Trump, said, don't join a third party, stay in the Republican Party. It's our party now. We got the majority everywhere. Get doubly involved to get rid of these rhinos. So you see all of the people who, just completely hate the party and hate all the leadership and are on Facebook being very vocal about that. They're organizing precinct delegate recruitment. They're bringing in the hottest, angriest, most, pitchfork wielding precinct delegates I've ever seen. That's going to be the next class that comes in over the next cycle. So, these, establishment people are sowing the seeds of their own destruction. It might just be, they just want to, piss in our faces as much as they can until they're inevitably booted. That might just be, one final money grab, one final con, one final scheme on the way out. That may be what they're doing right now, but they're sowing the seeds for their own destruction, because we're going to have more precinct delegates than ever, angrier precinct delegates than ever. And, they're going to look at, what Norm Schinkel said and be like, this guy is emblematic of everything we hate about politics, everything that's ugly and nasty about our politics, emblematic in him and many others. Many other, people have come out, and championed Ed McBroom and his report. Yeah. And, another one is Tony Daunt of, Michigan Freedom Fund. This is a guy who was ostensibly a leader of the grassroots, who wanted to, led all these campaigns, Pied Pipered so many conservatives for so many years. Well, he was a fraud the entire time. He was getting that DeVos money to just corral us and keep us, docile, so that we wouldn't pose a real threat to the establishment. Well, but these people are coming out and showing their true colors now, and I think it's going to be a blessing in disguise for us. Not just in the long term, but I think as of next year, we can really start seeing the turnaround, the immediate turnaround, in the party where so many patriots come into power.
Yeah, I don't get why anybody wants any of this, to tell you the truth. I mean, Ron Weiser is not a power seeker. He's a spender. He's given the party millions of dollars over the years. You can tell he's someone that genuinely wants Republicans to be elected and doesn't want there to be all this drama and this trouble. But he can't seem to keep people out of these positions where all they want to do is start more trouble and make it more difficult. I mean, I don't want to be doing this stuff. It was painful for me to write this resolution, because I know I'm burning bridges and hurting relationships, and we don't want to have to do this kind of stuff. But at the same time, if they do something so extreme as to responding to 10,000 people calling for a forensic audit by telling them they're wasting their time, they have no case, and then also legally threatening someone who's been a high profile in that whole effort, they're creating even more controversy. They're making this worse. And if they expect that we're gonna be the ones that go away silently, I think that's a terrible mistake. You mentioned Tony Daunt, and for those people who don't know, Tony Daunt, and this is probably a good segue because I want to talk about this campaign finance lawsuit with Whitmer. But he's the director of the Michigan Freedom Fund, which, for anyone that doesn't know, is basically the political arm of the DeVos family. And the DeVos family has they've done a lot to support conservative and Republicans over the years, and they're great on some issues. So why Tony Daunt would gratuitously attack Trump and attack Trump supporters and people who are critics of the election fraud, I don't understand it. But
well, after January 6th, I believe there was a huge schism between the DeVosses and the Trump network. I know Betsy DeVos was, I think, the first to resign and throw Trump under the bus and deny election fraud after January 6th. So from everything I've seen from that point on, the DeVosses have turned completely against Trump, and the stranglehold that they have on our politics, particularly on the west side of the state. You see these West Siders in very red districts, coming out against Trump, stomping on the rights of the whistleblowers and suppressing election fraud evidence, keeping it from the public. So it wouldn't surprise me to see a lot of these traitors and these turncoats, particularly Representative Steve Johnson, get some big DeVos fellowship shortly after he's termed out of office, and the rest of them are termed out of office as well.
Maybe. I mean, to me, I've been in situations where I've worked for someone who I've had disagreements with, and you try to minimize the damage. You try not to speak out and attack your former boss because it's unprofessional, it's damaging, it's demoralizing to everybody. And I don't get it. But in happier news relating to Tony Daunt and the Michigan Freedom Fund, we made a couple of videos last week talking about this developing story that Gretchen Whitmer has been raising money well over and above the campaign finance limits. And we made a couple of videos talking about this and the legal claims that someone should make against this. What's happened is the governor claimed that she is not subject to campaign finance restrictions because she is subject to a recall, although that is using the term as charitably as you possibly could, because there's no recall signatures submitted. There's no organization that has the resources to recall the governor. In fact, I don't think under Michigan law, any organization with any amount of money could recall the governor, because our law makes it just physically impossible to do. But she's claiming because someone submitted petition language against her that she's allowed to ignore campaign finance limits. Well, shortly after our email went out on Friday, we discovered that, as it happens, the Michigan Freedom Fund has filed suit, I believe, against Whitmer over that very issue. And I haven't been able to get a hold of a copy of the lawsuit. It sounds like they're making the basic arguments we've been saying people should make, which is that under Whitmer's interpretation, all any elected official, any incumbent has to do is find some warm body to file a motion to recall them with the canvassers, and then suddenly they're magically exempt from campaign finance limits. So and
I'd like to mention that Daunt is no longer with the Michigan Freedom Fund.
Oh, no, he's not?
He recently left and got replaced with someone else.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay. Still, I imagine they're fairly well connected. He's been working for them for years.
Yeah, I don't think it was like a messy breakup. That's
I don't know. Well, whatever. No sense speculating about that. But anyway, yeah, so the Michigan Freedom Fund has filed this lawsuit. Now, if you tuned into, well, they weren't live, but if you've watched our previous videos about this, you might know that one concern that I had was that potentially they may have an issue with standing, and that the ideal plaintiff to go after the governor would be any of the Republicans that were competing with her. And by the way, there are now also apparently to that same threshold, such as it could exist, recalls against Whitmer or against Benson and Nessel. And perhaps a Republican challenger of Benson or Nessel might be the best party to bring a suit on that. But I don't know. We will see. But and we'll see what happens with Michigan Freedom Fund's lawsuit. But I think they've got a great case, because the way the governor is interpreting the law is absolutely ludicrous. You know, they were comparing a 1984 case in which a state senator was actually recalled, in which they actually turned in the signatures and recalled him, and saying that, yeah, well, because in that scenario, when that senator was subject to a recall, and subject to a recall actually meant there was going to be a recall election, that he was not subject to campaign finance limits because the recall petition organization wasn't, that therefore all anybody has to do is file a motion for a recall with the SOS. Maybe they have no intention of getting the signatures. Maybe they have no financial resources to get those signatures. But hey, as long as anyone's subject to a recall, they can raise money without limitation. Because the logical extension of that would mean that any incumbent would have access to that privilege that any challenger would not. All they have to do is find some warm body to file a recall. That's all it would take. So there you go, guys. So we will be monitoring that situation. I think it's very interesting. I hope that the case goes well. If they have a standing problem, maybe somebody running for governor or SOS or attorney general might step up to the plate, because they would certainly have standing in a case like that. So I don't know if you want anything to add to that, Shane. Otherwise, we can move on to our next topic. I want to talk about the petitions, the citizen-initiated laws. We've got one is coming out imminently, and I think the other one is also coming out imminently. But I don't know. Is there anything you want to add about that?
Yeah, just that from what I heard with regards to the Michigan State Party and their, Secure My Vote ballot initiative, seems to have two good provisions in it. The voter ID for all ballots and eliminating private funding from elections.
Yep.
May seem underwhelming to some, who are, hardcore kind of in this bubble, understand exactly how the fraud happened last year and all the different ways that it happened. It seems like, you're just there's a million different holes in the boat. You're just going to plug two of them. But with that being said, I do think that, unfortunately, a lot of people have been led to believe that all these, all the voter fraud information is a conspiracy theory, that it's all nonsense, and a lot of activists have run with bad information in the past, QAnon-style gibberish and stuff that just ended up being blatantly false. I know a lot of that stuff is kind of put out there by the establishment, by the regime, to kind of get us off the tracks, and it's worked in many cases. So it's really difficult to make that case between a lot of the crazy conspiracy theories that have emerged about the election and the fact that so many people are in kind of a cone of silence. They get nothing other than the biased media, which states that, as we went through earlier in those stories, it's been proven that it's not unsubstantiated. All these words that would normally be, maybe in an op-ed used to describe a position are now in articles that should, are listed as hard news articles.
Yeah.
So there's never any background. It's just completely slanted. And people have been hearing this now every day, nonstop, for 9-10 months. So we have to get through to those people in the middle, the independents, the moderates, who understand that there is political corruption but don't understand the election issue, that have heard some of the QAnon stuff from election fraud opponents, and it's turned them off. So I'm thinking that the Secure My Vote might be the ballot initiative for Secure My Vote might be a good way for us to reach out to some of these people in the middle, engage them in door-to-door fashion, and give them, if we're smart, if we dot our I's and cross our T's, give them the information that they need to understand that there was grotesque fraud last year. Yeah,
let's back up and let's explain what we're talking about here. So there is a citizen-initiated law on election integrity that's been in the works for some time. Secure My Vote is this newfound legal entity that's going to be doing it, although understanding is that it's coming essentially from people who are affiliated with the state party. And we've been talking to them for a long time about various elements that need to be in there. And what we're hearing now is that what's coming out, it was supposed to actually, I think, be introduced on Friday, but now we're hearing Monday or Tuesday or maybe sometime this week. But it's essentially going to cover only two things. One is voter ID, including for absentee voters. The other is prohibiting the Zuckerbucks, the private funding of elections. And as we've made the point many times before, those are two worthwhile things to tackle, but they're far from the only things. And one of the things that we've been also talking about is that we have to understand there are limitations on how much can be done in one citizen-initiated law. And that's because you have, first of all, limitation on the 100-word summary, and also limitation on the fact that the petition sheets actually have to have the entire text of what you're doing on the sheets, or else you have to have a fold out or some additional thing. Now, all that being said, I think they should have more in it than this. And we've talked about a lot of those issues here, things that we've been pushing for at Rescue Michigan. And that is things like having a process to ensure that we have equal representation among poll workers. And that's an absolutely critical point, because they fundamentally are the ones that administer the election and they control the environment. We've talked about the rights of poll challengers. We've talked about prohibiting the tabulators from being connected to the internet. We've talked about having rights of canvassers, if their certification is made under duress, to take that back. There's a bunch of other things in there. So the question is, how much can you cram into one project and be able to do? And there's no one easy answer to that, because we know for certainty that the left is going to challenge these things in court, and they're going to say people didn't know what they were signing. The summary didn't say this. The summary didn't say that. This wasn't on the back of the page, or da-da-da-da-da. Now, that being said, I'm not sure that this was all they could do and this was enough. So I think we have to ask ourselves, and this is something that I think every viewer is going to have to decide for themselves, is this worthwhile or isn't it? And if it's not enough, the question is, can we do more? And I think we need to do more. But is this worthwhile? And to that point, I want to also, and we should loop in here, there's another project happening at the same time, which is Unlock Michigan Part 2. And that is a citizen-initiated law. It's the same thing. The citizen-initiated law process means you get enough signatures, the legislature can pass your proposal, and it's not subject to the governor's veto. So Unlock Michigan, they were the group that repealed the Emergency Powers of Governor Act, and now they're going about it again. We weren't sure they're going to. I'm grateful that they are. We were talking about this from the get-go, how important that is. We thought maybe we'd be the organization to do that earlier. But they're taking it up. And that's to basically end the loophole that the health inspectors can basically do the same thing that the governor was doing in the first place. And in both of these cases, these are what we call opportunity battles. That going out, getting signatures for good policy. And again, I don't think that this is enough what they're doing for election integrity, but it's not negative. It certainly is a net positive. And in fact, requiring voter ID for absentee ballots might do a lot to curtail absentee ballot fraud. It might be one of the biggest things. I don't know. Is it as big as signature checks? Hard to say. And is it as big as poll workers? Hard to say. But it's a good thing. And it is an opportunity for the grassroots, because the most important thing for everything that we want to do is building your local organizations, growing your organizations, getting new people engaged, reaching out to your neighbors. And I think we're going to make a lot of videos in the coming weeks with strategies, tactics, tips for growing a local organization, for going out, knocking on doors. But having a petition to do that's a great thing. So I'm still reserving judgment on the secure MI vote proposal, because we haven't seen it yet. We've heard what it's going to be, but until it's out there, until it's sent to the Secretary of State, we don't know exactly what it says. So once it is, we'll take a look at it. We'll see if there's any shortcomings in it. We did a video recently about Unlock Part 2. I made the point, I don't know why they're even allowing local health inspectors to ever have the ability to lock down their counties. So I think the language could have been better. but it's still worth doing. It's still a major curtailment of Whitmer. It's still a good policy fight, and it's still a good effort to get people into your organizations and get people together. So
Yeah,
I don't know.
if you're lazy, I mean, they'll probably pay some people to get the signatures or whatever, but that's not the point. The point is, you get out there, you meet people, you find people who are angry and know what's going on. Like we build our forces, and you can have local organizations and get them involved and make them precinct delegates. Show them that there's a community out there, that there's a willing, that this isn't over, that the time to fight back is now, the time to push back is now. They want us broken, they want us atomized, they want us thinking that we're alone in our homes, that we're just slinking back and feeling terrible and feeling like the whole world is got the boots around our neck. But that's not the case. The reason why they're going so overboard with this propaganda right now is because they're scared of the national uprising that has kind of coalesced around Trump. It was existence before Trump, Tea Party, Ron Paul movement, other things along those lines, but it's really taken hold in the nation around Trump.
Yeah.
And there's tens of millions of people, maybe over 100 million people who are like-minded, and that is a massive force, and it's a lot more powerful than the millions and millions of zombies that they have, who have no ability other than to take orders and submit. We have the human capital, we have the best of what's left of America, and we can turn this around. But we have to take these opportunities to get out there, meet people, grow our local forces, and then recruit precinct delegates, and then we won't have to deal with the likes of Norm Schinkel and other rhinos ever again.
Yeah. Anna says, by the way, folks in chat, by all means, submit your questions and comments. We're happy to read them on air. We want as much interaction as possible. Anna says, we have to ban unsolicited applications. Yeah, that I think that's a huge one. Absolutely. And, part of the problem with that, too, is I heard Christina Caramo speaking today, and she was talking about how so many people have said they received unsolicited applications for absentee ballots from the Secretary of State. But I would note that a lot of people got unsolicited applications from people that were not the Secretary of State, and the way they make them look is so that people wouldn't know the difference. When you get an application in the mail for an absentee ballot, it could be sent by a third-party organization. Unless you're sharp and know what to look for, a lot of people, I think, saw those. And one of them, I remember, it had a P.O. box that was a UPS store in Lansing. And it wasn't sent by Secretary of State. It was sent by these private entities. And that's a problem, too. It's causing immense confusion. So that's one thing I think we should be cracking down on is... And this was, by the way, addressed in the Rescue Michigan legislation that Ann Boland is not bringing up for a hearing, which is that the only applications the clerk should be allowed to accept are the ones that they themselves issue and the federal postcard. And that's it. Because having private entities send out these unsolicited applications is causing tremendous confusion and opening the door for fraud. She also says, I think it matters whether the manner of ID can be forged by a family member. Well... Yeah, I mean, it's a tough question. How much can you do? It's amazing to me. I heard there was, I think it was on Let It Rip, Christina Caramo was debating, Jim Runstead was debating Jocelyn Benson on Let It Rip, and Benson claimed that it's easier to forge an ID with a fake ID than it is to forge a signature. And I mean, it's so ludicrous. It's beyond comprehension.
Yeah,
but,
it's almost like how do you respond to people who are this disingenuous, say this dishonest nonsense, right through their teeth? I mean, I say you just keep hammering them and you never give them an inch. Engaging these people is, not the way to go. You hammer them, you expose them. That's the way to go about it. Not to, because you can't debate people who are this evil and dishonest.
Yeah. Joe Charles Lang asks, is there anything in the works for a full forensic audit in Michigan? Well, a bill has been introduced by Representative Cara. However, number one, leadership has shown they do not want to take it up. They've referred it to the Government Operations Committee, which is typically the place where bills are sent intentionally by leadership to never get a hearing, to be killed. And even if it were to advance, of course, the issue that we have that Arizona does not have is that the governor would veto it. So it is a long road to go for a forensic audit. There's no easy way to do it. Potentially a resolution of the legislature, if it was somehow funded by a private source, might be able to work.
Well, let me interject that.
Yeah.
Let me interject there. A certain whistleblower, or whatever you want to call him, who we're familiar with by the name of Jovan Pulitzer, says that he has secured the funds for an fully independent forensic audit in Michigan. What are your thoughts on that, Adam?
Well, I don't know if I want to get into Jovan Pulitzer tonight, only because he's now the star of a new movie that everyone is gaga about. But maybe we should do a live viewing of the of that movie and do a blow by blow as it goes. However, I mean, number one, I don't know that a resolution of the legislature can actually compel a forensic audit. It's not like, and this is the thing people understand. Every state has different policies and different procedures. And what you can do in Arizona doesn't mean the same rules apply in Michigan. We have completely different constitutional systems. And sure, they're all loosely based on the U.S. Constitution, but the details are enormous. And this is what's so frustrating. You know, I get emails from people all the time. I got an email from someone the other day who says, why is it that we can't recall Gretchen Whitmer? Because we did this email where I mentioned in passing, we can't recall Gretchen Whitmer. They said, well, how come in California they can, you know, Democrat, far left California can recall their governor, but we can't recall her here? Yeah, because they have completely different rules. The threshold for signatures in California is way, way, way lower, and they get way, way, way more time to do it than we do. Ours is so high, and so many signatures in such a short time, it's virtually impossible. And that's just the nature of how our system is set up. So I've never heard in the past of a resolution of the legislature, a concurrent resolution, having any force of law to be able to compel an action the way they say that Arizona was able to do it, even if they don't have to secure public funding for something. So, I mean, it is not clear to me. Sorry, go ahead.
In Berry County, where Sheriff Darleaf is attempting to do a fully independent investigation into the elections there, I don't want to say all the city clerks, but a lot of the city clerks are refusing to comply. They're filing lawsuits, and the Berry County clerk actually said that the investigation will go on, quote unquote, over her dead body. So we're going to get no compliance with any of these city clerks, these county clerks, many of whom are just in on the steal. Others are just your typical bureaucrats who don't care about accountability, didn't do their due diligence at all, and now don't want to be exposed for their incompetence that allowed all of these irregularities to happen. So we're seeing like the worst mixture of incompetence and criminality right now come together to prevent any sort of justice from happening after last year's corruption during the vote.
Yeah, Nana Bubby asks, is it possible for a county to initiate their own audit? Unfortunately, that is a question for an attorney, and I am not an attorney, and I'm not going to pretend to be one. It is perhaps possible, but I would say if you have a friendly county commissioner, they should check with their legal counsel about that. But yeah, as Shane just said, you're going to have internal resistance. The clerk, who is often a member of the commission, is going to be opposed to it, and it's going to take real organization. Every time you have a bureaucrat stopping you. You have to remember the bureaucrat is responsible to some elected official somewhere up the chain, and that's the person that's got to be your target. So that might be the county legislative body, the commission, might be, might be a mayor, might be a governor, whoever it is. But whenever the bureaucracy is the resistance, the question is who is that bureaucracy accountable to, and those are the people that have to be your targets. So. But anyway, I would say I'm not optimistic about audits in Michigan. Not that we shouldn't have them, but that the likelihood of being able to push through and to get them, given the resistance that we have, does not seem likely to me. But that doesn't mean we shouldn't get every politician on the record, and if they're going to be the roadblock to the audits, that they shouldn't be held accountable for it. So that's, I think, what has to change. And I think this past election has created an enormous amount of interest and understanding into how complicated and difficult it is to enact any meaningful change, but especially on election integrity. People are having a renewed interest in their local governments and in politics in general. So I hope people get involved and get their elected officials on record, because if they're the ones stonewalling, they're the ones that have to be challenged. So anyway, should we move on? We've got a few other topics to get to. We're an hour in. I want to bring up a couple of things. One is someone sent me an email about a Michigan State University student interested in pursuing some kind of litigation about vaccine mandates. And there's so many vaccine related lawsuits happening around the country. It's too much to even keep on top of. And again, I'm not a lawyer. I'm not, and I don't want to offer legal advice here, but there's a lot of potential for litigation on these issues, perhaps on public policy as well. And we're happy to talk to some groups who are doing this, although the principles we've talked about on other issues are the same. It's all about confronting politicians and requiring that if they don't do things your way, you're gonna go after them for roadblocking whatever bill it is that you're looking to pursue. But there's, I think, a lot ripe in the legal sphere for this right now. In particular, a prominent attorney made this point. We're finding out right now what the government's official line now is that vaccines are not preventing the spread of the virus. And that's their pretext for requiring mask mandates and lockdowns and all the rest of this garbage. But here's the problem. The only legal basis for vaccine mandates is preventing the spread to others. The government can't require you to take a drug to protect you from yourself. That has been litigated. The only excuse they have for mandating vaccines is that will stop the virus from spreading to other people. If they're now conceding that doesn't work and that they're not effective, then they've undermined their legal argument for all compulsory vaccines. And that may be a strong case that an attorney could bring with the right attorney and the right client or the right class of clients. So just thought I'd throw that one out there for you guys. What else do you want to talk about tonight? Oh, there's been some developments in the Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping case this past week. Is that right? So we should talk about that, I think. You guys may have seen this news.
Yeah, one thing I'd like to mention is, it was very obvious that it was a federal plot.
Yep.
From the get-go.
Yes.
But now it's extremely obvious that it was a federal plot, and it's sad, but that it takes so long for conservatives to understand that this is happening, that Republicans, all of our leaders in Lansing will immediately jump on whatever the narrative is, white supremacists or whatever, or Proud Boys or whatever, even if it's completely false. It's just something that they'll all jump on, they'll all run with the media's narrative, and it does so much damage to our country and demoralizes the grassroots. So pathetic, but now the truth is coming out, and it's nice to see that people are responding to that.
well, the truth's coming out now, but the damage is done. And that's, I think, the point here is, this is a point I think people talking about election integrity also need to make, is that the steal was, it involved certain illegal elements. It also involved certain legal things that they did, including the mass media relentlessly slandering Trump throughout his presidency and protecting Joe Biden from every one of his real scandals. And this is another example of it. I remember it was about a month before the election. I got a call from ABC Nightline, big national media show. They've got like 1 million or 2 viewers on their show, and they interviewed me when I was at one of the Capitol demonstrations, and they called me and said, "We want to talk about the politics and the election and blah blah blah. And can we talk to you? We want to get a feel of what the grassroots is doing." It's like, yeah, well, we got this meeting coming up on Tuesday. It's a local meeting. You can talk to me and talk to some people and da 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 da. And so they came out to meet with me, and we met first at a restaurant, and they're all super friendly. And I'm showing them that, you know, this is a restaurant that was closed down and devastated by the lockdowns. Oh yeah, that's so terrible and so sad. And they interviewed people and took pictures for with the meeting. I remember there's a woman there who said, "I got a ballot from the Secretary of State from my mother that died 10 years ago." And I asked her very clearly, this was not an application. You mean you actually got a ballot sent to your home for your mother that died 10 years ago? Yes, I did. So they got that on tape, you know, and they wanted to get some footage of some people going out knocking on doors and all this stuff. And then after taping all this at our meeting, then they go to interview me. And the woman, the reporter, what's her name? I can probably look it up. Let's see here. Well, it's not important. She had a funny name. It was like Juju or something. Let me see. ABC Nightline. I'm going to look it up because I want to see here. What was her name? Anyway, she instantaneously flipped to being totally confrontational, totally hostile, and literally all the questions were trying to tie me and tie everybody to the alleged kidnappers. So I can't find the. Oops. Yeah, let me get you back on the screen. Sorry about that, Shane. I was surfing through that page trying to find the name of the reporter. But anyway, I did just a great job in the interview. She never aired it. So that was the end of it. But the whole thing was to try to tie everybody to the Whitmer kidnappers. And of course, I told her, you know, no one's ever heard of these people. I even said to her, I think this is probably just another plot like the Hootery plot was back in 2011. For those of you who don't know, there was a group called the Hootery that was supposedly a right-wing militia that turned out to be, it was all FBI agents, except for the innocent people who got caught up in it, but they all got acquitted eventually. But it was all a political hit. And if you're all familiar with the FBI, this is not the first time they've done these things. There's been stories from Glenn Greenwald and others of them trying to start Al-Qaeda attacks and get people to accept the Islamic terror threat at home. And of course, there's COINTELPRO, but that's its whole own story. But yeah, turns out 6 people were charged. 12 people were FBI agents. The majority of the entire organization were FBI agents, including this fella who has been arrested for beating his wife half to death. You'll see he took his wife to a swingers party. That's an orgy. And then he got drunk, and she was not happy, and they went home, and he tried to strangle her. This is the FBI's agent who was going to be one of their best witnesses in the whole Whitmer kidnapping plot. Then there was this other guy, Richard Trask. Is this the same one or no? This is that was Richard Trask, but there's another one who was one of their top witnesses. Who he was one of their informants, but then he was arraigned on gun charges, and apparently is no longer on good terms with the FBI anymore. So that's who the FBI is. But the point is, I remember before the election talking to my parents, or my dad in particular in Rhode Island. I remember him saying, "Hey, how about that Gretchen Whitmer plot?" He's in Rhode Island. He's heard about this Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot. It's national news. I went to visit him this past week. "Hey, Dad, did you hear about the latest in that Gretchen Whitmer kidnapping plot case?" No, what's the news? funny the news media doesn't have quite the same diligent reporting. I mean, we see a couple of stories here about this, but it didn't quite make the national headlines that it was all a big frame up, you know. But it served its purpose. Its purpose was to influence the election. That's what it was all about. It doesn't matter that that it's all collapsing now. Even if it didn't, even if they got them all, even if they didn't get them all, even if they all walk free because it turns out the FBI framed them, the damage was done. It was the October surprise. And that's the mass media for you, and the FBI for you, the deep state for you.
What's good, though, is that this, again, the damage was done, so to speak, but at the same time, it had no real impact on the election. It had no real impact on politics in terms of society. And,
Wait. This story had no impact on the election? You don't think so?
Not even close. It was out of the election. It was out of the news cycle in a week.
I don't buy that. No, I think you're totally wrong about that.
Didn't make a difference at all. No one gave a shit on
how do you
election.
know?
I mean, it happened already after all the fucking mail-in ballots were in. So it didn't.
Some mail-in ballots were in.
The election at all. It had no impact at all.
I don't buy that. I think this had a huge impact. I mean, there were polls done over the Hunter Biden laptop story, and they asked people, if you had known about this story before the election, would this have changed how you voted? And a good number of people said yes. And keep in mind, the election was decided by 3 percentage points in Michigan by the official numbers. It doesn't take a whole lot to move that needle. And that story was played to the nth degree. Gretchen Whitmer, the poor victim of kidnapping, it turned around the whole narrative of Gretchen Whitmer, evil bitch that destroyed our whole state, into a poor innocent victim of terror. I mean, I think, and remember, people like you and me, people like our viewers, are hardcore political people that are on top of this kind of stuff. And the people on the far left are hardcore people who are on top of the news. The people in the middle are the ones that swing back and forth, that can determine an election. And they're not hardcore consumers of news. And when they hear stuff like that, I think that can generate a lot of impact. I mean, not huge percentage points, but it can be enough to make a difference. So I don't think that was a non-issue. I think that was a huge issue. I think it was an intentionally timed political operation by the FBI to generate sympathy for Gretchen Whitmer and to generate animus and hostility against Trump and his supporters. Was it enough to swing the whole election? Possibly. I mean, keep in mind, it was 3 percentage points in Michigan, but in other states where they also heard about this story, it was much, much closer. It was by a thread in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Arizona and Georgia.
It didn't last very long in the public lexicon, though. It was out of the news cycle in a day or two.
I don't know if you're right about that, but at any rate, I think it's an important story for people to understand in the context of how the deep state does get involved in elections in a way that we currently have no means for addressing. I think people should be talking about this story and about how guys like this are able to hijack our democracy. So, anyway, all I got on that, but we'll stay tuned. We'll see how this case progresses. It sounds like some of these defendants have, they've got serious legal counsel. They are planning to claim an entrapment defense. So we'll see how that goes. Joe Charles Lying asks, do you honestly believe the 3% is legit? No, but the problem is we don't know exactly how much fraud there was. We can point to things that we can prove, but they don't have conclusive numbers to go by. We can say for a fact they impeded poll challengers en masse across the entire state. We can say for a fact they abused and illegally accepted signatures that should not have been verified in the manner that they were. How many votes does that translate to? We don't know. We can look at all the ways that vote fraud is known to occur that they removed all the safeguards of. Like people filling out ballots for seniors, people filling out ballots for spouses and children and parents. And you have no way of deciding how many votes did that impact. Now, the legal standard is supposed to be that an election must be overturned if the number of ballots that can't be determined exceeds the margin of error or the margin of victory, right? So if you win by 3 percentage points and more than 3 percentage of the ballots are in question, then you've got a real problem. That was the standard. It was not the standard in this past election. Because otherwise, more than half of all of the ballots in Michigan are in question. Now, hypothetically, you could say, well, most of those signatures would have been approved anyway. Maybe, but the problem is when the process is illegal, when the process is in violation of the law, you have no way of pinning a number on it. So the bottom line is we have no way of knowing exactly how many votes it would have taken to swing the election, statistically speaking. So, yeah, and that's the fundamental problem here, is that what they did mostly in ways that you can't determine. How many ballots were swindled out of drop boxes that did not meet the legal standards for drop boxes? There's no answer there. So anyway, what else did I want to talk about tonight? We got a bunch of stuff. Trump's big tech lawsuit. We talked about that last time. We pointed out that it was not very well drafted. An amended complaint has been filed as of this past Wednesday. I don't know. I have to imagine they added in the fact that that the Biden administration is now saying that they're manipulating Facebook and Twitter and the other social media giants, but I haven't seen the amended complaint yet, so I don't know. So stay tuned, guys. Hopefully we'll find out more about that soon. I hope the lawsuit is successful. We expressed our hesitation as written. If you don't know what I'm talking about, you can go back and watch that video. But the Trump lawsuit basically did not make the best arguments they should have made, and instead made basically the weakest arguments they could have made. So hopefully they fix that in their amended complaint. But I don't know. I guess we'll see.
Is that the lawsuit that was filed by the America First Policy Institute?
Right. Yep. Yeah. That one.
The America First Policy Institute just hired as one of their ambassadors a foreigner who said that Trump and Tucker Carlson are racist, argued in favor of military intervention in Venezuela recently. He's pro COVID-19 lockdowns, and that's one of the guys who's going to be the ambassadors for the America First Policy Institute, Trump's new thing.
Jeez. Yep. Well, that's too bad. Well, anyway, just to recap, folks, what's going to save our country is not coming from the top. It's not coming from Washington. It's not coming from Lansing. It's coming from the grassroots. And everything that we want to do, that we want to achieve, is based entirely on how many people are going to be involved and active. And right now, in your own neighborhood, there are a ton of people who want to get involved, who are concerned about what's happening to our country, concerned about what's happening to our schools, concerned about what's happening to our government, and seeing the corruption at the highest levels and the unprecedented deprivation of our civil liberties. And they want to get involved and get connected. And the most important, best way to do that is to go out and knock on doors and connect to them. So that is going to be our focus for the weeks to come, is leveraging the citizen-initiated law projects, these petitions, to your benefit, and also all kinds of other topics about how to be effective at the local level, how to run meetings effectively, how to bring people in, techniques for knocking on doors, talking to people, building rapport, getting people involved. All those things. The saying all politics is local is true. And you can't change Lansing, let alone Washington, from one county. But if we can all get involved and get on the same page and get to do those things, building the local organizations that play their positions in the larger fights, that's how you can win at the state level and even the congressional level. And that's what that's going to take. So in the weeks to come, that's what our focus will be on. It's going to be all about grassroots leadership. So I think I've covered everything I wanted to get to, and we've been going for almost an hour and a half now. But in the chat, folks, if you have anything you want to ask or any comments you want to add, please do. We always enjoy the interactivity. Otherwise, it's been a good show. I think we've had some fun talking about some of the more sad and pathetic things the GOP is trying to do to get the grassroots under control, because that's how we get unity, right? We get unity through submission and through stomping us in the face. I don't think that's going to work, but we'll see. We'll see what happens. So,
well, I mean, if the GOP wants to keep listening to Frank Luntz and other disgraced, disreputable operatives, then they're going to lose many future elections, and they're going to lose all their power. And the grassroots knows now what needs to be done, that this is Trump's party, that they're going to be bringing in waves and waves of even more pissed off precinct delegates, so that there's going to be no ability for any sort of moderate to survive in these circumstances, unless the MIGOP realizes that they need to do more for the grassroots. They need to do more to actually deliver on their promises. But, doesn't look like that's going to happen anytime soon or ever.
Well, they will change when they realize there's that's the only way. That kicking the grassroots and spitting on them and attacking them is only a recipe for failure. Nana Bubby asks, Seth Keshel said, I don't know who Seth Keshel is, but he said Macomb would be a good county to start with. What do we think about that? I think your own county is a good place to start with. Macomb is, and I think where that comes from is that Macomb County is historically the home of what were known as Reagan Democrats. And Macomb County was the county that swang in a big way towards Donald Trump. It's a swing county, but it's a union county. And same with Reagan, with Trump. They outperformed with the union vote, and that's where that came from. And we're certainly happy to see that, and that's all very good. But for the grassroots out there, I mean, we've talked on other shows about various issues happening locally around the state. Like we were talking about this case in Sault Ste. Marie, way up in the UP. And I just say, I can't control what happens in Sault Ste. Marie. I'm not in Sault Ste. Marie. I'm 300 miles south. You're on the west side of the state. You can't impact Macomb County politics. The best place to go is to your own precinct, your own township, your own city. That's where you have to build an organization. It's good to get involved at the county level and in the broader picture, in the goal state we have, where we've got organized groups happening in every city and township. You'll want leaders who are involved at county level and networking on county related issues, but you got to get involved in your own neighborhood. That's where the people are that you can reach. And that's just the only way it goes. You can't save America if you can't save your own city or township or precinct. So start right where you are. So, all right, Shane, anything you want to add before we call it a stream?
I think I'm good.
All right. Well, hey, thanks everybody for all you do for liberty. Stay in touch. RescueMichigan.com. If you see this video, if you haven't already done so, please sign up. Get your precinct voter file. It makes it a lot easier to go out and knock on doors. We'll be talking a lot more about that on upcoming podcasts. And of course, by all means, help us spread the word. Obviously, we're not expecting to get anywhere on YouTube because they don't like this kind of topic, but nonetheless, like, share, subscribe, all that good stuff. And we'll also mirror this video on Rumble as well. And once Rumble starts having interactive live streams, maybe we'll be there instead. So anyway, thanks again for all you guys do for liberty. Until next time.